Good morning. I would like to share with you today about my thoughts. What if? What if we start noticing things in this life and around us, just like Jesus notices? So, this is a sermon out of the series, What If? And we talked about many what ifs in our life we experience and what crosses our mind when things happen. What if? And so today is what if we notice things as Jesus notices? Many years ago, when my son was in middle school, I was not yet much familiar with the concept of Halloween celebration, but I just followed the instructions that I needed to take my son to school for the trunk or treat, and it will be fun for him, and he really wanted to go. I thought, since I was not a chaperone, I did not know what to do with children on such evening. I thought, gosh, I had a whole evening for myself, at least 2 hours or three. And the first thing that was on my to-do list, of course, was to wash my car. It was rainy for many days, and the car was dirty and needed to be washed. And here it is, the quick and cheap car wash on 87th Street and 87 and Antioch, not too far in Overland Park, Kansas. I knew that place already since I often got my gas uh, pump there and even washed my car. So I knew it was trustworthy and it was truly cheap and quick. I paid through the drive through and I knew that there are no attendants because it's a standalone building right behind the gas station. So I entered the car wash and waited for the gates to close behind me. And then I put my car in a neutral gear and just relaxed. Nirvana. I'm on my own. I can relax. I can think of something, just simply be on my own. And then the brushes started moving, and it was the time for myself. That I did not have much at that time. And do we often have that time for ourselves? That's the whole question. And so the car is moving, I don't have much to do. And then the cycle is over, and I see the green light, and I started moving, and the gates did not move up. Not that familiar sound that the gates going up. I waited a little, I see the green light, so I'm supposed to get out. And there is none and there is dark, and it is a Halloween night. Which I need to tell you that the first time I saw the arm hanging from underneath of a trunk of the car in front of me on the highway, I called the police. I called 911 because I'm from Russia. You know how back in the 90s we had many people kidnapped, and so seeing that arm hanging down from elbow to the wrist, I thought like, oh gosh, that's the wrist of the person and the hand and the arm who is kidnapped. So I called the police and they laughed at me because they said, ma'am, this is a Halloween time. So that's definitely not somebody being kidnapped. So Halloween did not become yet my friend. I did not see much fun in that yet, only scary things. And imagine here I am in the car wash, trapped. I am stuck. And so that's how it was. And ironically, of course, the darkness and the silence of all this machinery stopped. And I just felt like that's it. My life is over. That cheap and quick car wash was not my friend. And then, of course, when I tried to get out of the car, and I looked down and I realized that I cannot do this. I thought maybe I just can walk out and find a door in that dark place. But as soon as I opened it, even in the dark, I saw water and wires. So I realized, being an engineer in the past, it's not a safe place to walk, especially alone. And so imagine that panic, sense of panic, and the moment of being unseen started setting in my brain and in my heart. And so I started realizing that quick is not always speaking about quality. I realized that cheap and quick can be not necessarily something that I would um, consider next time when it comes to my car and to my life. But then that moment of being alone and praying to God, how can I get out of this? How can I be seen again? How can I see the light? And how can I stop stretching myself so thin that I wouldn't even think any further and just consider that quick and cheap solution in my life that we often do? And then, of course, I started thinking, why do bad things happen to good people? And then I thought of the Gospel of Mark. Remember how Jesus was going with his disciples on the road, and how he considered that shouting voice maybe not necessarily um, timely because he was on the mission. And here is in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, verses 46 to 52, we hear the story about Bartimaeus. And I think it's a very good story for us to consider today because we will learn from Bartimaeus something that applies to our lives. First of all, the story goes on about him with a very short information that we could get, that he was a blind beggar who was sitting by the roadside. And then, as soon as he heard about Jesus from Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And then, before we continue, I wanted to understand, what does it mean to be blind from your childhood? What does this mean to sit on the side of the road and have all these people passing by? All these people not paying attention to you, wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard, and nobody paid attention. And let me tell you why. The reason for that is back at that time, people looked with judgment upon those who had some infirmities, some illnesses, because in the culture, Jewish culture, if you're handicapped, if you have leprosy, if you're poor, if you are living as an outcast, then it is because you've done something wrong. It is a judgment from God. And so people considered the blind and the lame and the lepers as people who are unclean because God punished them and you cannot touch them. That's why this blind man was a beggar and was desperate to get some attention. He wanted to be seen, he wanted to be noticed. And that's exactly why in that car wash, I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be found. And the first thing I've done, I called 911, of course. And I said, I'm stuck in a car wash. And it was a chuckle on another side of this call. And the dispatcher says, ma'am, that's okay. You can just call the attendant, not calling us. We are doing more important things. I said, you don't understand. I am completely alone, and this is a standalone building. So nobody will come to save me for a while until maybe another car comes to the gates. And then maybe somebody hopefully will notice that the gates does not go up. I'm waiting here for a while. Nobody comes so far. And it's evening and it's a Halloween. You have to understand that people do not probably wash cars on such night. They're probably having fun. And the gas station probably is about to get closed. It's a very small one. Please come and rescue me. You see, I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be found. I was getting desperate. But instead, the dispatcher says, ma'am, after 3 days, if your family does not find you, we will file you as missing person. That did not help me at all. I got even more panicky. So I hang up and I'm sitting there processing my thoughts. So back to Mark. This Bartimaeus was desperate. After so many years, when he could not find any help, any attention to himself, he suddenly hears that Jesus from Nazareth is coming. Jesus, who already got the reputation of a healer, of a person who is chosen by God, who is doing miraculous things for people. And then that thought, that cry out of his soul, cry from the bottom of his heart, I want to see, I want to see. And then he shouted again. He shouted again. And then, when the disciples tried to sternly order him to be quiet, just shut up. Don't cry out anymore. But he cried it even louder, Son of David, have mercy on me. And then Jesus stood still. You see, this is when I wanted to talk today about how Jesus notices things, how Jesus pays attention, how in our life, maybe if we notice the same things as Jesus notices, maybe it will make a difference and a long lasting effect in our lives. Change that, not just a quick and cheap change that sometimes we pursue because we are in a hurry. We are living a very fast life. We want things to be quick, and yes, we want them to be cheap. But Jesus, though he was in a hurry, he was pursuing his mission. He could not stop. And many times, remember how he would not respond to requests, or he would even withdraw, and he would go into the prayer and in silence away from people. But here he stood still and said, Call him here. And they called the blind man, saying to him, Take heart, get up, he's calling you. And so he sprang up and came to Jesus. And imagine this man, this man who performs miracles, talks to him. He looks at his face. He pays attention to him after so many years of being unseen. And Jesus asked him, What do you want me to do for you? It's like he does not know already. It's like he did not hear the cry, the shouting, the desperation. But he asks him again because he wants him to articulate it. He wants this man to tell him what does he truly want in his life. You see, that moment of revelation when we want nothing else but to see, or we want nothing else but to be seen. Because in this case of Bartimaeus, his blindness was connected closely, tightly, to the fact that he was unseen by other people. He could not see, but he was not always seen. And so Jesus heard him saying, My teacher, let me see again. You see, that's what it is. I want to see. I'm desperate. I want to see. And so my teacher let me see again. And so what happens? Here Jesus is doing good. He's doing good. He says, What do you want me to do for you? And my teacher let me see again, as I said. And then Jesus says, Go, your faith has made you well. And he acts immediately. You see, that's a quick action, but is it cheap? So today I want to get your attention with this triangle of project management. It's a very important triangle because we always want all three. We want to get good things, or we want to do good things in our ministry, let's say. And then we want them to be done fast to us, or when we serve others, we also want to act quickly, just like Jesus, because we want to do good. And we are the followers of John Wesley, who says, Do good as much as you can, wherever you can, whenever you can. So do good. And so we want to be fast, we want to be effective. But today, I want to get your attention with efficacy, because doing things fast, but doing them good, really with quality, because good also stands for our values. What do we value in our service, in our faith? What do we value as a church community? What do we value doing mission in the world? So immediately, this Bartimaeus regains his sight and follows Jesus on the way. Talking about efficacy, talking about that need to do quality things, calls us to rethink our whole mission and vision. The mission, of course, is to make disciples for Jesus Christ, new disciples. Just like here in this story, Bartimaeus, regaining his sight, follows Jesus. How can we invite other people, new people, through our ministry, reaching out to them to follow Jesus? Maybe the only way is to notice them, to notice things about them that maybe we miss on the go, doing things quick and sometimes cheap, not noticing that we maybe do it on the account of quality. So in Philemon, such a small book, I found this wonderful thing about praising people for their partnership. And that's quality, that's value. I always thank my God as I remember you in my prayers, because I hear about your love for all his holy people, and your faith in the Lord Jesus. I pray that your partnership with us in the faith may be effective in deepening your understanding of every good thing we share for the sake of Christ. And then he continues. So, my question today to you is about this project management triangle. So, what did I learn when I got stuck in that car wash? What did I hear? The most important things, of course, is about the burnout. So I was sitting there and crying out to God with my panic that I wasn't seen. I wanted to see. I wanted to be noticed. I wanted to be found. And then in that moment of realization of something missing in my life, I realized I was running for too long, for doing too much for people, and absolutely not paying attention to myself. Again, serving two churches and being a student, I was just doing too much being a single mom. And so, in that car wash, when I finally found a solution, God enlightened me. In that moment of panic, I suddenly heard clearly, phone, call the attendant, call the management of this car wash. And I thought, how do I call them? Yes, I already have a phone since I called 911. But how do I call that car wash? And suddenly I hear receipt. Receipt, you have a receipt. So in that dark place, I kind of spotted the receipt finally. And then looking carefully with the phone, I did find the phone number for that car wash and I called them. The car attendant was very confused, like who is talking and why I am stuck in the car wash. The most horrible thing that could happen, he told me later, that if nobody came that night, but or somebody did come and the gates did not open, they will simply put the sign that the car wash is out of order. Until it was fixed, I would be sitting there not found. So I'm glad God gave me that moment of in revelation and knowledge that yes, you do have the tool. It's right here, Lydia, under your nose. And so then imagine the attendant came and the gate goes up and I finally see the light, not the light of the day, but the light of the street lights, and the freedom, the sense of getting out of the darkness and getting out of that imprisonment. I'm no longer stuck, Lydia. That was such a joy that I related to Bartimaeus when he probably saw the light of the day for the first time in his life. And so I exited not only the car wash on that evening with understanding of a new perspective in life. I realized that there are things in life that should be balanced. Yes, I'm doing my ministry. Yes, it is important for God, but it is also important not to pay such high price. Because you see, when we do good things for people and we do them quick, just like Jesus, by his example, what we overlook, it's not cheap, it's costly. And we all know the price Jesus paid for us for doing that good and doing that immediate help, just like in the case of Bartimaeus. Immediately he um, healed the man. He helped him to be seen. He helped Bartimaeus to see the light immediately. But at what cost? At cost of his vision, he had to slow down. But mainly, everything in Jesus' ministry was costly because he ended on the cross. He gave his life for us. And I think trying to be like Jesus, we all run ourselves so thin. We stretch ourselves so thin, not realizing that all three, good and cheap and quick, cannot be done in project management at once. It's either good and cheap, the cost is not as high, or it is good and quick, or it is cheap and quick. And so, trying to do all things, we don't realize that we are facing a burnout, just like I faced a burnout, and God made me stuck. So, I want to spend a little time on that God made me. You see, the mistake that we have is that when bad things happen to good people, we immediately, again, just like in the Jewish culture, we judge. If something bad happened to me and I got stuck in that car, probably people will judge. Oh, sure, she kind of brought it upon herself. Yes, but God did not do it. You see, God does not do bad things for people. What God does, God allows these things to happen because when we stop paying attention, when we stop noticing the signs of a burnout, then we start running faster, we try to do too much, we do not slow down, and then we start making mistakes. And that's how I ended in that car wash, being stuck. And I regained the sight, and as I said, I exited that car wash with a new perspective that I need to do my ministry in a different way. And ever since, I started applying that concept to my churches where I serve as a pastor. I always watch for people's burnout. I always warn people that, do we notice what Jesus notices? I try to remind people to remember their values. What are your values? What our church what our church does well, what God, first of all, calls us to do for this community, for this particular neighborhood, for this particular city, in this particular time of our life or in other people's lives. And actually, it all takes us what is our focus. So that's a time of the year when we need to review our vision, review our values, and stop trying to do all three, good and cheap and quick, but instead try to understand what God wants us to do in this particular time in history. Last week, I know I watched Adam Hamilton's Vespers. It was dated October 22nd, and his story was about how he met a woman on the Lake of Ozarks with that he suddenly noticed having this woman had a very interesting and unusual tattoo that he wanted to ask what was the meaning of that sunflower and the name on her arm. And when he started asking, he learned something that if he did not notice that tattoo, he will never learn the story of this young woman who lost her daughter in a car accident, and it was a drunk driving, and so she lost her daughter, and in memory of her, she has her name tattooed on her arm as well as a sunflower. You know that image of heaven, where do we go after we die, was important. Somehow, Adam Hamilton thought that it is important to ask this woman about, where do you think your daughter is now? And then he proceeded when the woman says that she didn't know. And it seems like it was devastating to her not to know where her daughter was. So Adam told her about the three heavens. One is the heaven of Eden, and another is heaven of redemption. And the third one is the king's garden. And then when he told this woman that I know that I believe that your daughter is in the king's garden, that was a moment of peace and acceptance of the loss. Finally, the grieving, everything came together. And if Adam said, if I did not notice that tattoo, we will never have this conversation. I will never know this story, and this woman will never probably learn and accept where her daughter is. So let me ask you a question. Remember that story on the of the oxygen mask on the plane. I always had a problem with that um, particular story because particular recommendations and actually instructions when the plane is experiencing turbulence or immediate landing is required. So these oxygen masks pop up and you have to put it on yourself. When I've heard it first, I was not agree. I rejected that recommendation because I felt like, what if my child is next to me? Of course, I need to put a mask on my child's mouth and nose. But the instructions are different. And so when Katie um, in my church came to me last week and we talked about that oxygen mask, I immediately recalled that sense of, no, I don't think I totally agree with that. But now, when Katie Danner reminded me of that oxygen mask, I thought it applies to this case so well. Think about yourself when you feel stuck in your life. Think about your church when people are doing too much and they're excited, but gradually you start noticing the signs of exhaustion, signs of maybe some people start having low energy, some fatigue. And you probably are familiar with the term compassion fatigue. So, not to end in that compassion fatigue toward others, the way to prevent this is to show compassion to you toward yourself first, like putting that oxygen mask on your face to save yourself and then to preserve yourself to do more good in the world. So let's ask ourselves today again: are we doing good, or we are doing it cheap, or we are doing it at a high cost that causes burnout and maybe not necessarily even too much money, but unfortunately that is a factor as well in our mission and the vision. So let's start thinking about ourselves and choosing for each ministry those two, either good and quick, or good and costly, yes, and of course quick and cheap. So each situation requires different approach, and I invite you to pray about it, and I invite you to be optimistic, but start with your self-care. Take care of yourself as a leader. Take care of yourself as a pastor, if you're a pastor and watching my sermon and listening to this. But majorly, be sure to pay attention to people around you if you are the leader. Look for the signs of a burnout, but majorly start with the vision. Follow the vision of God for your church, for the vision of God for your community, and start there. Show compassion to yourself, calculate well, but always choose only two. Do not try to get all three, it never works. So today we heard the story of Bartimaeus, and we've learned a lot about how to do self-care and how to balance these things and not trying to get quick and cheap effect, but instead trying to but instead try to get a long lasting result, transformation that Jesus is calling us to achieve. God bless you and have a wonderful day.